Metaphysics is the science of first principles. These are principles of common sense that apply to all of reality. According to the authoritative teaching of the Catholic Church, any true set of ideas must be in agreement with the metaphysical principles of traditional Catholic philosophy. Let us apply one of these principles to molecules to man evolution. The idea that molecules changed into human beings through hundreds of millions of years of the same kinds of material processes that are going on now. The principle we will consider is this: no effect is greater than its cause. The principle is easy to understand. If we have a balance scale and a 50-pound weight one side of the scale, we will need a 50-pound weight on the other side to balance the scales. If a 40-pound weight were to balance the scales with a 50-pound weight, the effect, balancing the scales, would be greater than the cause, the placement of a 40-pound weight on one side of the scale. And that is impossible. So let us examine the traditional Catholic doctrine of creation in light of this principle, because if that doctrine is true, it must agree with it. The Catholic doctrine of creation holds that God created all things by His Word, by willing them into existence. In the words of the Catechism of the Council of Trent, quote, "He spoke, and it was made. He commanded, and it stood forth," unquote. This doctrine agrees perfectly with the principle of no effect is greater than its cause. God, the Supreme Being, creates beings that are lower in being than Himself. The cause is greater than the effect. So what about molecules to man evolution? According to this idea, non-living matter brought forth a living organism. A one-celled organism gave rise to a multi-celled organism. A multi-celled organism gave rise to a fish to an amphibian to a reptile to a bird and a mammal, an ape-like creature to the body of a human being. At each of these steps, the effect is greater than the cause. In Fides et Ratio, Pope John Paul II lamented the scant consideration accorded to speculative theology and in disdain for the classical philosophy from which the terms of both the understanding of faith and the actual formulation of dogma have been drawn. My revered predecessor, Pope Pius XII, warned against such neglect of the philosophical tradition and against abandonment of the traditional terminology. In Humani Generis, Pope Pius XII had reminded the bishops of the whole Church that the traditional philosophy, acknowledged and accepted by the Church, safeguards the genuine validity of human knowledge, the unshakable metaphysical principles of sufficient reason, causality, and finality, and finally, the mind's ability to attain certain and unchangeable truth. For a cause to provide a sufficient reason for an effect, the effect cannot be greater than the cause. Thus, even though Pope Pius XII allowed discussion of the evidence for and against the evolutionary hypothesis, and Pope John Paul II expressed his opinion that the hypothesis of biological evolution was supported by scientific evidence, their authoritative teaching on the necessity of upholding the traditional metaphysics of the Catholic tradition leads to one inescapable conclusion: molecules-to-man evolution is impossible. But wait, says a scientist in the audience. When hydrogen combines with oxygen to make water, H2O, the effect, water, is greater than the cause, hydrogen and oxygen. So molecules-to-man evolution does not violate the principle that no effect is greater than its cause. Not so fast, answers St. Thomas Aquinas from heaven. I answer that the effect, water, is not greater than the cause in this case, because hydrogen and oxygen are predisposed to combine, and their union does not produce something that is greater in the sense that it exceeds the natural potentiality of those two substances. On the other hand, for the body of an ape-like creature to turn into the body of a human being through a natural process, say of mutation and natural selection, the new organs and functions that would need to be produced cannot result from the natural combination of the material elements that exist in the body of an ape-like creature or hypothetical ancestor of chimps and humans. But wait, says another man in the audience, I'm a Catholic. I know that molecules didn't change into men all by themselves. It was God who made the jumps happen. Not so fast, we must answer. Atheistic and theistic evolutionists claim that molecules-to-man evolution is a scientific hypothesis. By definition, a scientific hypothesis has to explain the evidence without an appeal to God. If it can't, it is not a hypothesis in natural science. What you have done is to make God the savior of evolution. But Jesus did not come into the world to save evolution. He came into the world to save you from sin and death and fractured fairy tales like molecules-to-man evolution.